This is Champagne Confidential,
where real conversations meet real life.
We're a therapist
And a lawyer.
And longtime friends
who are not afraid to talk about the things most people avoid.
We're talking motherhood,
relationships,
work, pressure, and boundaries.
Hard conversations.
The kind you usually only have after hours.
No scripts.
No filters.
Just honest conversations.
So grab a glass, you're invited into the conversation. Hey guys, thank you for joining us on the Champagne Confidential podcast. Today we're going to be talking about motherhood and entrepreneurship. Pour yourself a glass.
Do you ever feel guilty?
I do feel like I've worked through a lot of it. The guilt thing is often a concept I think a lot of moms struggle with, is just feeling bad for prioritizing their career.
Entrepreneurship is definitely not for everyone. You're putting yourself out there and you're willing to take risks that you don't know if they're going to pay off, right? I mean, without great risk, there can be no great reward.
You have to brace yourself for this impact because it's going to be a lot. Hi, Val. How are you?
Good.
It's good to see you today.
You too.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about our topic today. We're going to be talking about motherhood and entrepreneurship. And the reason, I was kind of thinking about it a little bit before our conversation, and I've known you now maybe, almost 10 years, and I don't really know your beginning story. I know a little bit about, kind of what got you into law, but I don't know kind of the ins and outs of, did you always see yourself as an entrepreneur, or was that something that kind of came later on? I know that in your field, there's just such a variety of different paths you can take on how you kind of landed where you did. Is something I'm really excited to learn a little bit more about. So we're going to kind of focus a little bit today on telling and sharing our stories on how we do it all, essentially, yes. Which I think is definitely a loaded comment there, because I feel like so many people kind of come in and think, how do you do it all? How are you managing it all? And, the truth is, I think most of the time we're kind of hanging on for the ride, right? But I'm really excited to just kind of dive in and learn a little bit about your story, how you started.
It's funny because this topic, I know we've been talking about topics for such a long time. This topic is I'm so passionate about it, right? Because it really defines who I am as a person, right? A business owner and a mother. And to be able to combine the two, in my opinion, is just the ultimate dream, right? Mm-hmm. I'm looking at two roles that I have always wanted since I was very young, to be a lawyer and to be a mother. And to be able to do both at the same time is really absolutely wonderful. But to answer your question, no, I didn't always know that I wanted to be a business owner. And I think that happened over time for a few different reasons. I knew I always wanted to be a lawyer and a mother. So naturally, the fields of law can be very intense, right? The hours can be very demanding. And when I first started, I was working for a law firm and the hours were ridiculous. I would be at work at 7 a.m. and I wouldn't come home until 9 or 10 o'clock at night. So to think that I'd be able to have a family with hours like that and be good at it, it's not possible, right? Really, without a lot of help. So I feel that I paid my dues. I worked for a few different firms, and then I was running a department of one of the firms I was working for. I was running their real estate department, and I was running their estate planning elder law section. And my husband one day said to me, why don't you do this on your own? I think I had hit a crossroads, right? Where I wanted a family, but I was working so much, and he knew it, and he said, I'll support you. Why don't you give it a try? You can do this, I love to talk to people, obviously. Mm-hmm. He said, you're a great salesperson. You can do this. You're running the department. Why not do it for yourself? Now, when you have my support and we're not raising a family. So I took his advice, and I remember looking at the women in the office, not to say that the men don't have similar struggles. I wouldn't ever say something like that, but I think as a mother, and you can agree with this, we put ourselves in a different category when it comes to raising a family and running a business, and I'll touch on that more later. But I know that when I made that decision, a lot of it was based off of the fact that I was working for a female who was the owner, one of the partners of the firm, and she had so much flexibility. And I respected her as a person because she was a fantastic attorney. She was incredibly intelligent. She was always hands-on in the office. But at the same time, she looked great, right? She took care of herself. She had children. She never missed a school function. Her kids were in middle school, and she was always at their sports and whatever they were doing in school. And I really respected that. The one thing that got to me was the fact that there were other females, mothers working for her who were not the same age. Who were the same age. And they weren't able to leave, right? They were locked to that billable hour. And I remember thinking to myself, if I ever do this, if I ever go out on my own, I'm going to respect all of my employees' time just like I respect my own time, right? So if they come to me and say, my son has a concert or a Thanksgiving Day parade, do you mind if I come in late? The answer is always going to be yes, because I think that's really important. And that's really important when it comes to balancing a career in general, let alone your own business, right?
Sure.
So that being said, I did take my husband's advice. I went out on my own. It was not easy in the beginning, but I loved it. And I kind of rolled with the punches. And to be completely honest with you, when I had kids and I started a family, it became more difficult, right? It wasn't easy, but I never look back and think to myself, I should have taken any other path. It was the perfect path for me.
Yeah, that's great. Was there anyone along you mentioned your old boss. Was there anyone else in your life that kind of was instrumental in kind of showing you the way or inspired you even as a young child, like to get involved in law or to have an interest there?
I would have to say my mom, and not because she's a lawyer. She's not. In fact, my mom was a stay-at-home mom for very much of our life. And I respected her as a stay-at-home mom because she was the best. I mean, she did everything for us, and she was involved in the school, and she never missed a beat. She had that ability to be there at all times. She also taught me at a very young age to not rely on anyone else. And she was the one who really pushed the career on me and said, you're going to college, you're going to get a great job, and you're going to be independent. Fortunately, I have a very supportive family, husband, children, but if I didn't, I feel that I'd be able to take care of myself. And I think that is so key. And I really learned that from her. So I give all credit to her, to be honest with you.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. How about yourself?
Yeah, so similarly, my mom was a stay-at-home mom also. She did end up going back to college later on in life. So I had, a lot of support at home. And I think I always wanted to be a mom. That was always something that, I had this nurturing kind of way about me. And she was a big part of that, just kind of being a witness to her experience with us and seeing how she had that flexibility to be at all of our functions and be a part of things. I also feel like that there was a great amount of sacrifice in that. Finances were a struggle, and my dad worked very hard to be able to allow my mom to be able to be home with us. And so I think from a young age, I kind of had this mindset. I was always interested in business. And I remember being in high school, like looking through books on what I was going to do for my career. I mean, this is many moons ago, but business was at the front of that. And I actually, originally started college going for business and then shifted gears for human services. And in that kind of experience, one thing that came up so often was that you couldn't help people and make money. And there was always this conversation around, almost like a shameful conversation around the fact that if you profited from helping people, that was a bad thing. And you don't get into this field because you want to make money. You get into this field because you're a good person. And if you are making money, you're not a good person. It was kind of relayed that way. It wasn't necessarily, said exactly in that tone, but that was kind of the takeaway for me. So for a long time, I struggled with that because I always had this like passion inside of me to want to do more, but felt I had to suppress it sort of because it wasn't always acceptable to make a profit from doing this type of work. And, you were a big influence to me, honestly, because when I first met you, you had small kids and you had an established firm and you were doing so much, but still able to be a good mom. And I remember feeling like it was like it had to be either or, right? Like I couldn't help people make money and be a good mom. You couldn't do all three of those
Mhm.
things simultaneously. So, there were other people in my life too that I kind of looked to for inspiration and guidance along the way. But I think ultimately just being able to see that I could do these two things. These two things could coexist. I could make money and help people. And think about the size of the audience I could help, right, if I am making money, because there's so much more reach when you have that financial stability to be able to do that. So I feel like, when I was able to merge the two and be able to start a private practice and build revenue through that practice, even with like fellow coworkers and colleagues, it wasn't acceptable, like in some aspects. I remember when I first went out into private practice, I was running the business solely private pay. And I was kind of communicating with other colleagues and getting feedback, and everybody would tell me the same thing, like, don't you feel bad taking private pay from people when there's like insurance or there's, options to help people get therapy more accessibly. And I remember, again, that same sort of feeling coming up around shame for wanting to build something, and having to sort of suppress that a little bit and rationalize for myself that think about my reach, think about how much more people I can help if I have the money to do that. And so that kind of was something that I think along the journey I kind of tried to keep in mind and shake off a little, that like it's okay to grow something in a big way and make money too,
Sure.
and model that for my kids, be able to show my children that I'm doing that, kind of let go of some of that shame around it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so speaking of shame, I mean, obviously in a different angle, did you ever feel guilty or do you ever feel guilty about having a career and raising your kids
Yeah.
and making that choice?
For sure. I think there's definitely been moments of guilt. I do feel like I've worked through a lot of it. Initially, I remember when I first was talking to my husband about opening the practice, and I said, I was almost like warning him. I'm like, you got to understand, I am going to be pulled in a lot of directions. If I'm going to this and I'm going to put everything into it, I'm doing it 110%. And it's going to mean that there's going to be sacrifice on my family's side. And I need you to know that because I don't want, you to have this like delusional thing that I'm going to be able to still keep up the same way that I am doing the things at home. And at the time I was working part-time. My kids were super little. I had to go back for some additional education to be able to do this job. And so I was juggling quite a bit at the time. And I just remember like being like, you have to brace yourself for this impact because it's going to be a lot. And you mentioned just having the support of your family. I feel like I wouldn't have been able to do it without my husband's support to really fully, down to like setting up the office, helping me get, just all the little idiosyncrasies that come up along the way of like establishing something and growing something, the time commitment, him, helping out with certain aspects of the kids' drop-offs and the things that I couldn't do, cooking dinner on Monday nights, right? Like that's his thing now. He cooks every Monday night. And like, I was always that person that was doing all of those things. So I think I've had to reframe my view on what this means for my family. And, even just like last night, I was like making chicken cutlets and I'm on the computer putting an intake in while they're grilling. And I'm, getting ready to go out to see a couple of friends for dinner last night. So I'm like, it's always like this kind of balance of just juggling circles around everything to make it all work somehow. So I had to really reframe that. And I think that, the guilt thing is often a concept I think a lot of moms struggle with, is just feeling bad for prioritizing their career. And I think something that's really, truly helped me is just using it as I am modeling for my daughter. I'm modeling for my son all that I'm doing. And they watched my business grow. They watched me start from the bottom and work my way up and having my ribbon cutting ceremony and being a part of the grand opening and all the things, you know? And so even though I might not be there for them in the same exact way I was when I was working less, they get this whole new version of me, and I'm hopeful that it's modeling that for them so that they can someday, you know, kind of reach their dreams and do what is important to them.
Right. I couldn't agree more. It's funny because I remember when my kids were little, I felt a constant guilt, right? And I think it was self-inflicted. No one made me feel that way, but I know that, you know, sometimes I would look at other people and think, oh, I wish I could be there every second of every day for them. And I had a wonderful nanny, you know, from the beginning of time, and she's still with us, and she's fantastic, and I thank God for her every day. But I know that when they were young, I definitely struggled with that. And that being said, I think I really pulled myself very thin. So when it came to class mom in preschool, I was the class mom. I was the class mom for all three. I was the religion teacher. I mean, I do everything, and I do it to the 10th degree, right? And I think that there was a very pivotal moment when I realized that I didn't have to feel guilty anymore. And I'm not sure what happened or why it happened. But I know what you're talking about when you say you're modeling for your kids, because I remember I was putting my oldest son to bed one night after school. And it was the beginning of the year. I think he was in elementary school, and I had done the preschool class mom, and I was really worn thin. And I remember putting him to bed, and he said to me, Mom, why can't you be class mom for, maybe it was the kindergarten class? And I think the kindergarten class was really demanding, right? We're not talking about preschool anymore. We were talking about, like, you're in the class, you're creating the fun events, and I don't have time for that, you know? And a year or two prior to that, I would have felt awful. I would have been like, I have to be the class mom, and I have to figure it out. And I remember looking at him and saying, Mommy can't be the class mom because I have a job. You know, Mommy's a lawyer. I'm responsible for other people. I employ 7 people who rely on me to give them a paycheck, to make sure we have business coming in, to make sure they're able to feed their families. And I explained it to him in that way. And for the first time, I didn't feel bad, and I didn't feel like I was making up an excuse. I felt like I was telling him, this is what I do, and you should be proud, because I'm proud. And it was such a shift. And now I don't even think twice about it, right? Now I agree with you. Now I think to myself, wow, we do it all. Yeah. You know, we do it, and we do it well. We're great moms. We are great business owners. We're great friends. We're great wives. And I think that there's something to be said for that. And I can only hope that my kids learn from that and respect that. And I think that they do. You know, they're great kids too. So yeah, that's definitely something I agree with.
Yeah, and I feel like you mentioned your nanny, and I think that's like, you know, sometimes I feel like we always see what's out in front, right? Like what we're doing, all the things that we're doing. You got social media showing you that your business is growing, and you're doing this and that, and you're traveling with your family, and you're, you know, all these different things that we're doing on the day-to-day and how it appears, but you rarely see the behind the scenes, right? And I just remember like thinking to myself, you know, especially as I was getting the business started, like I was doing a lot of the stay-at-home mom type stuff. I was cleaning the house. I was doing all the laundry. I was cooking every night. You know, and I loved that. In that period of time, that was right for me, you know? But I remember when I made the shift, I had to say like, okay, but do I really need to be cleaning the house? Like, is that something I can delegate? Because I don't love that. It takes away from my kids. I'm not spending time with my children because I'm mopping floors and between phone calls and it's not realistic. I needed to kind of have someone come and help me with that. And again, talk about shame. Like, I remember feeling really shitty about that. Like, oh my God, I can't figure it out? What is my family going to think that I have to hire someone to help me because I can't do it all, And kind of like hiding that I had this person coming to the house. I hope nobody sees her car out front. Like, it's so silly now in retrospect, but like I had so many feelings about that because it was like, no, you should be able to do it all. And if you can't, there's something wrong with you that you're not. So, outsourcing was such a bad thing. And I remember like once I started having her come to the house, I'm like, I freaking love this. This is amazing. Like, I can have her clean the house. My house is immaculate, and I can spend and watch a movie with my kids. I'm not spending the time that I would have been spending doing that,
For the record, I've never felt bad about that. But you're 100% right. There's such a feeling of it's just that mom guilt.
Yeah.
And I think it's because when we were growing up, we were seeing a very different world, right? It sounds like we were very similar in that my mom was doing all of the cooking. She was doing all of the cleaning. She was doing everything. She was home. My dad was working multiple jobs. And it was just the way it was. So here we are now, mothers. Who's our role model? Our mothers. And we're thinking to ourselves, well, we need to do the cooking. We need to do the laundry. We need to do all of it and run a business. It's not
unrealistic.
Humanly possible.
Yeah.
And you would drive yourself crazy if you did it. You can't, somewhere a shoe's going to drop, right? And best it be the laundry versus our business or our family, right?
Of course, yeah.
So,
yeah, no, I agree. I think that was definitely a pivotal point for me because I felt like then once I was able to open up that little bit of delegating to someone else, then it was like, oh, well, what other services can I, use? Because I'd rather be putting my time here, or I'd rather be completely present with my family when I can be with them, and not be kind of doing these mundane things that, I love to cook. That's one thing I will always do. It's something I show love to my family through my cooking. That's not one of the things I'm going to sacrifice. But when it comes to the laundry and it comes to the cleaning and it comes to some of these like insignificant things, even with my work, like billing. I was doing billing myself for years, managing all the billing on top of my administrative responsibilities. And I'm saying, why am I doing this, right? This is something I could easily outsource. So I know it's hard for a lot of people to ask for help. And I think sometimes there's just power in that because, again, it's like, what more could I be doing in a much more meaningful way if I wasn't pulled to do all these mundane things? You know what I mean?
Definitely. And I mean, from a cost-benefit analysis, right? If you think about the amount of time that you would spend, I mean, I know my mom would spend an entire Saturday cleaning the house,
sure.
top to bottom. She would do it every day during the week, but then the big cleaning was the Saturday. And if you think about, 8 hours, what you could do in your office for 8 hours versus cleaning for 8 hours,
Right.
and what it would cost to pay someone to come in and clean your house. I mean, no-brainer.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And if you're not finding joy in it, then what is the point? Right. I mean, I do agree with you. There are a lot of things that I do. And if you, again, because of Instagram and social media, if you look from the outside in, it looks like we have it all, right? We can travel and we have these wonderful children and we're not looking stressed, although we may be stressed. But I think if you really take a step back and look at the behind the scenes, like you said, what's involved, there's a lot more there. And people will ask me, well, what time do you get up? I mean, I'm the one who gets up at 5 a.m. every morning to put breakfast out for my kids and make sure that they have their lunches. I make their lunches. These are definitely tasks that I could delegate, but I want to do that.
Right.
And, my kids are at an age now where they're old enough to do a lot of this for themselves. And my husband will say, listen, we're raising men here. We need to teach them to do these things on their own. But I think because I do have the business and I, find myself having to focus on that a lot when I can take the time to do these little extra special things like packing their lunches, I want to be the one to do it.
Sure.
And I find joy in that.
Yeah.
And I think that might be the key. It's finding the balance of doing what you find joy in. right? And I really do feel like at this point in my life, everything that I'm doing, everything I'm touching, I'm finding joy in it. I'm also seeing time fly. And I think that, definitely weighs in. I mean, when I drive my kids, they could take a bus, but I drive them to school. And I just want to spend the time that I can with them because I know that it's fleeting.
Right.
You know?
And that's what's so nice about, there's so many pressures of owning a business, but that's what's so nice about owning a business is because you have that flexibility that you really can't get anywhere else. I mean, I feel like similarly, I love to, I pick my kids up every day from school. So I feel like for me, that's like a special time just to take them home and have a little conversation in the car. It's so small, but it means so much to be able to have that level of flexibility or to drop, go to the field day or go on the field trip, whatever the case may be. I have that ability to do that. So I feel like a lot of people that may be kind of tuning in are thinking about starting a business or are thinking about the possibility of maybe returning back to their career or seeing their career in a different way. Do you have any kind of insight or anything that you think kind of helped you jump into it?
I think it's important to note that it's not all fun and games. It's a lot of work, and you have to want to do it. So I really do think that if you want to start a career or a business or jump back into the workforce, it should be something you love because there are going to be sacrifices, right? And in the beginning, you're going to put so much time into it. I think as long as you can focus on something that you love and you want, you will be successful. I think, like you said, delegating, having support. You need some level of support because it's virtually impossible to do it all on your own, right? Someone has to be, especially if you have a family. I mean, someone has to be there for the kids. Someone has to pick up the slack when you can't. And it's important to have some sort of support system, I think.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking a little bit about this idea because I feel like I know we had, if you tune into our first episode where we talked a lot about the marathon run, we had a conversation, I think during one of the trainings. I don't really remember exactly, but I remember we were talking about like the crazy people that do the marathon. And is it a personality type, right? And we were kind of going back and forth about like, are we crazy? Like, because we're doing this. And I remember thinking, just across the span, right? It's like there has to be something within you that wants more for yourself in different aspects of your life, whether that's in owning a business, running a marathon, setting some sort of goal for yourself. So I feel like, because, the hidden piece of all of this is the discipline, right? Like you set out to do something, set up a business for yourself, there isn't instant gratification in that. And it takes a while and it's hard and it's long hours and it's establishing what you want this thing to become. And you have to be consistent and you may not make money right away, right? Like there's so many kind of things along the way that don't give you the satisfaction of a paycheck. And so having to kind of navigate that and build it and get it to where you want it to be takes a certain type of person. I think that's, a piece to it, right? Like it's interesting that for the two of us here, we have our businesses, but we also have all these other goals rolling behind, whether that's taking a trip somewhere, running a marathon, trying to grow a podcast, right? Like all these kind of side things. And I'm curious, do you feel like there's something within you where that came from? Like, where do you think that mentality came from to go for it, right? Like, even when it might be hard.
I would love to know the answer to that. Because I definitely have that mindset where when is enough enough? It's never enough. People will ask me, do you plan on retiring? Would you? No, I mean, I don't ever plan on doing nothing, right? I feel like there will always be something more. I always want to push myself. I push myself to be the best. And I see that in my kids too. So I do wonder if maybe that's something that I learned at a young age. If you want something, go for it and just be the best you can be at it, right? If you give it your all, then nothing can stop you. I also think people gravitate to similar people, right? I mean, I know my husband's the same personality. He also owns his own business, which comes with its own struggles. Friends, we gravitate to one another because we are always pushing ourselves. We parent similarly. And I think that there's something to be said for that. I mean, same thing, your husband, he has his things on the side.
Yes.
Entrepreneurship is definitely not for everyone. Sometimes it's easier to many times it's easier to just go into a job and collect a paycheck and love your job and do it well. But I think business owners are definitely another breed because you're putting yourself out there and you're willing to take risks that you don't know if they're going to pay off, right? I mean, when I started my business, I didn't know if I would be successful. There's no guarantees. Where would I find my business? Would I be good at it? Would I be able to, hire great employees? I mean, there's so many. Would it sustain itself? Could I do this long term? And I think that knowing that there's a risk is scary to a lot of people. But in my opinion, without great risk, there can be no great reward.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's, for me, it just started at a young age. How about yourself?
Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking a little bit about it. Like, where did that kind of drive come from? I don't know if it's just that because, when I think back on just kind of like limiting experiences of just what I saw the world to be. And then I remember my aunt, and funny enough, she's a marathon runner herself. But prior to that, she kind of broke the mold in my family in that she never went to college, but she worked for a beauty supply company and worked her way up to the top of the company. And I remember she was always jet setting. She was always somewhere. Like, we had this joke, every time we'd see an airplane in the sky, we would always be like, there's Aunt Jeannie flying overhead, because she was always at different parts of the world making connections. And, it was so inspiring, and she had a family and she managed that career. And so I think it just opened up this window of possibility. And I really appreciate my relationship with her, because even though I don't see her a ton, when I do, she really takes the time and attention to like tune into what's going on for me. How's things going? Where are you at with this? Here's this inspirational book I've been reading. And, she introduced me to Tony Robbins. She was listening to him like in the 80s, just such a worldly view that it allowed me to see another possibility. And I think seeing her and witnessing her journey of just all the things she was accomplishing, and she'd probably laugh to hear this because I don't think she thinks of herself that way. But like, for me, it was such an inspiration of like, wow, she's doing all these amazing things. There's potential for me to be able to do that too, So I think that's definitely a piece of it, was just kind of watching someone else live through that experience. The other piece that I think is super helpful, and you touched a little bit on it, is just the proximity to people that are similar to you. There's always that saying around like the circles you keep are the, where you're going to go in your future, right? Kind of thing. And I couldn't believe that more. I really feel like that is something that, has been really foundational for me, is surrounding myself with people that are, and it sort of just naturally happens weirdly. But I do feel like maybe I'm putting that out into the universe in some sort of way, and now I'm like connecting with different people that are within that same proximity that I'm looking for. So, even if you're someone that shies away from putting yourself out there, I do feel like when you take those risks and you put yourself in the proximity of the people that are doing big things, naturally you're going to rise too. And I feel like that's something that for me was just so helpful in keeping me focused, keeping me motivated, was seeing people that were doing it.
Yeah, it's funny because you even mentioned having these role models who, unlikely role models, right? They wouldn't even necessarily see themselves. And I too was the first person in my family, like your aunt, to graduate college, right? To go off and have a 4-year degree and then to go on to law school. I mean, in my immediate circle. And I know that my grandmother, who we've spoken about this, she's very influential in my life. She was always so proud of everything that I did. And I looked to her as a role model. She lost my grandmother when she was very young. She never remarried. She was always so incredibly independent. She would travel. She went to Jerusalem. She went to Israel, Egypt. I mean, really these kind of unbelievable places. And when she was traveling, I remember thinking at the time, is this safe? But she never stopped herself. And she was just such a strong person who was able to do things on her own, despite the fact that she didn't have anybody, a spouse, a living spouse. And I always respected that. And when I went to law school, she was so proud. I mean, she wanted a lawyer in the family. And I know that at the time I was also engaged to be married, and she loved Mark. And she knew that I would get married. But I think the idea of having a lawyer as a granddaughter to her was just a lifetime goal. So she developed Alzheimer's while I was in law school, while I was engaged. And unfortunately, she never made it to the wedding or to see me, become a lawyer. But when I passed the bar exam, I went to visit her in the hospital. And at the time, she was really non-responsive. She didn't recognize anyone. And I had printed out the passage and I showed it to her. And I said, Grandma, I just want to let you know I passed the bar exam. I'm going to be a lawyer. And for one moment, she snapped out of, the condition. And she said, all of your hard work paid off. I'm so proud of you. And for me, that was just such a pivotal moment because I think I knew, she knew that I would get married and have a family and all of these things that I've always wanted in life. But I think for her to recognize that has just been so special to me and really shaped me as a person and, as a business owner. And even in this field of law, I'm in the elder law and estate planning field because of her. So, you just never know who's going to influence you and why. Right. I mean, she wasn't a business owner. She was just a very strong woman. So I think surrounding yourself and looking up to people and looking at their strengths and recognizing why is this person somebody that you respect and finding the best in people can definitely help mold the person that you are or who you want to be.
For sure, yeah. Have you ever felt like imposter syndrome in those situations? I feel like sometimes when you're coming in as, trying to get in the proximity of something, right? And you're in a room with people that maybe you feel a little insecure because you're not there yet. Have you ever kind of dealt with that?
Sure. I mean, when I was younger, especially putting myself out there as an estate planning attorney and an elder law attorney, when I would be in the circles of other estate planning and elder law attorneys or even clients, I had no estate myself. And here I am telling people,
right.
How to protect their money and how to, preserve their estate. I think I was working, I didn't even own a home, and I looked like I was 5 years old when I was telling people, so definitely in the beginning. And when even now, when I tell people I own a business, I've owned a business for over 15 years, it's shocking to some people. Almost 20 years I've owned a business, so yeah, in those settings and circles, or sometimes I still pinch myself now, right? You meet with other business owners and knock on wood, I mean, I have a very successful business. I love what I do. It's a thriving business. And sometimes I have to remind myself, you're doing great, right? Like there was definitely a time in my life where I remember at New Year's, I would think to myself, we made it a year. I hope we can make it next year. And now I'll find myself at New Year's thinking, oh, that was a good year. I wonder, and I'm like, wait, who am I kidding? This has been going on for 20 years. Providing I keep going with it, we should be good,
Yeah.
So sometimes it's hard to believe that this is a reality. And I guess that's part of loving what you do.
Right. Yeah, there's that fake it or make it kind of mentality that I think, especially if you're someone new coming into the business world and you're trying to get in circles where you can get yourself close to where it is you want to be, you may feel like insecure about it or feel like you don't deserve a seat at that table, and trying to kind of break through that a little bit and say, no, I do deserve a seat at this table. And this opportunity, this kind of facing this fear of putting myself out there is going to benefit me long term. So kind of, again, seeing that reward on the other side of the risk of putting yourself out there, which is scary. And it doesn't always go perfect, right? Like that's the other side of it, there is a fear that something could happen where your business may not take off or you may have hard times in your business, right? And that's, I think, the reality. But trying to kind of just stick with it, keep consistent, and keep producing in some sort of way ultimately will hopefully get you to where you need to be.
Definitely. And I think manifesting your destiny is also part of it, right? If you want something, then go for it. I mean, everything is attainable. We live in a country really where sky's the limit. It's what I tell my kids. You can do anything you want, right? My youngest child wants to be the next Steph Curry. He could do it if he wanted it enough and worked towards it. So business ownership is no different, right? Life is no different. Anything you want, if you really put your mind to it, you can do it, right? Dream the impossible, Walt Disney.
Yes, very true.
I mean, it all comes full circle. I really think that, if you're listening in and you're thinking to yourself, how can I do this? This is something I want. I want to own a business. I want a family. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. It may be very difficult, but eventually you can do it if you work hard enough. And that's the beautiful part of life.
Right, right. Yeah. And I think just trying to, I think one of the biggest kind of misconceptions or, again, if you're looking from social media perspective of just all the things you can obtain is the self-discipline that has to be behind that, kind of showing up every day, starting somewhere small, finding a starting point that may seem insignificant, but over time, growing from there. And that's always, anytime I'm thinking about attacking a goal of some sort, I always try to like micro that goal of just what's the smallest thing I can do to make that goal a start, a reality, and I think that's a piece to the manifesting, right? Is like being able to kind of say it out loud. I want to own a business and this is what that's going to look like. And just kind of free writing out how you're going to tackle that. And for me, a big part of it, like I mentioned before, was just my kids were so small and I was going back to school at nights to like get the remaining part of my degree. And, I remember thinking, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I had to do like 3,000 clinical hours, unpaid time. I'm saying, how the heck am I going to find the time to do this? But I just approached it. Every time I got to that marker of like the next thing, I was like, I'll deal with it then. I'm not going to focus on the 3,000 hours when I still have a whole year of education, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's like kind of trying to micro it down, and somehow I made it happen. So it's kind of just, I think, trying to look at it from that lens of, these small things we do, they do ultimately make a big difference if you can be consistent with it and have the discipline over time.
And one more question for you.
Yeah.
Do you ever regret it? Do you regret anything that you've done? Do you regret opening a business while raising a family?
Honestly, no. I don't have any regrets. I think there were certainly hard times for sure. There were moments where I was like, should I really be doing this, or should I be growing at the speed I'm growing? And just trying to kind of like manage it all, feeling like I was pulled in a lot of directions. At times away from my family, that was really hard, especially when my kids were super little. And again, just the judgment of others, like feeling that, okay, you're doing these big, great things, and maybe a handful of people really love that and are witnessing that and are happy about that for you. And then there's like in the back of your mind, the people that are maybe thinking, well, why is she not just with her kids? Why is she spending this time, putting her energy here when she should be here? And people have their own feelings. And I just try to always remind myself that my path is my path. I'm living my life. They can live theirs. And, for me, I want to be a great role model to my kids. I want to establish something that will hopefully be long-term for their future, financial stability. Like there's so many aspects around it that are so important to me that I don't think if I was living a different life, I can't even imagine this not being a part of my life. Like it's such a big, crucial piece to who I am that the thought of, not having my energy put into this, I couldn't imagine life any different. How about you?
Absolutely not. I have no regrets whatsoever. And I think, something that we didn't really touch on, but just showing the relationship too to our kids. So yes, we have the business ownership aspect and achieving your goals, being a great role model for them, but also showing what it takes to be a partner, right? Because something we didn't necessarily have to grow up with back then. Times were very different. But now, being a partner to your spouse is so important. And that may mean very different things for people, right? I have many friends who are stay-at-home moms and their husband works and they have come to an agreement that works for them. And, kudos to you for, figuring it out. I think setting the example of make sure that when you choose your spouse, you come to an agreement that's going to work for your family. One of the biggest decisions I think you'll ever make in your life is who you're going to marry, because that person is going to be the person who you hope supports your dreams, whatever they may be, right? Who you can support if times are tough. For myself, I'm a business owner. My husband's a business owner. If he doesn't have a good year, well, at least he has the support of me and vice versa. So I think, it's important to recognize that as well. And I think no regrets. I think every moment, every choice I've made has been in the best interest of my family.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point. And I think we could probably make a whole episode about that, choosing the partner piece, because I feel like
maybe we should.
Yeah, maybe we should, because I do think that's really, really a critical point. And it's hard because I think so many people find their partners young in life and you don't always know all the, ins and outs of that person. And unfortunately, sometimes that unfolds in different ways for people. But I do think having that strong support system where you both kind of share that vision for yourselves and as a couple, being able to live a life individually and have things that are for you and just for you, and having things for you as a couple and as a family is just so important.
Yeah. Well, cheers to us.
Cheers.
And our successful businesses and families. Cheers. Thanks for tuning in today.
Please like and subscribe to our social media channels at Champagne Confidential Podcast.